Welcome everyone to the fourth session in the 2019 Virtual Summer School Series, presented by the National Association of Extension Program and Staff Development Professionals and the Program and Staff Development Committee of the Southern Region Program Leadership Network. This webinar series is endorsed by the Joint Council of Extension Professionals. Virtual Summer School is being hosted this year by Michigan State University Extension. I'm Gwen Sheely with Michigan State University Extension, and I'm the NAEP SDP Programs Committee Co-Chair, along with Celeste Carmichael from Cornell University. We also have to thank Diane Mashburn, who is the representative for the Southern Region PLN PSD Committee, for her work in helping to organize this webinar series. We are pleased to have you here with us today to learn about today's webinar, which is titled Constructing Cohorts that Enhance Employee Engagement in Extension. Our presenters include a team from the University of Minnesota, including Amber Shanahan, Extension Educator, Nancy Hegland, Program Leader in Youth Development, and Trish Sheehan, Extension Educator. We also have Celeste Carmichael, who is the Program Development and Accountability Specialist at Cornell University. So with that, I would like to turn the presentation over to our team from the University of Minnesota.
Thank you so much, Gwen. We really appreciate the opportunity to share the work that we have done at the University of Minnesota. So as Amber gets up our PowerPoint, we are ready to go.
Okay.
Oh, thank you. We are looking forward to sharing the programs that have allowed the Center for Youth Development at the University of Minnesota to continue to build employee skills through a cohort model. We believe the cohort model has allowed our organization the opportunity to not only build skills, but to build relationships too. And relationship building has been one of the highlights of developing two new cohorts, which we call Youth Development, Learn and Lead, Anchor and Sustain. I'll continue and just share a little bit about Minnesota, which we want to give an overview a little bit about how we're organized at the University of Minnesota. So in Minnesota, extension centers, we have 4 centers. And so we are part of the Center for Youth Development, and we all the centers have campus, regional, and locally based staff. And in Minnesota, we have 87 counties, and they border Canada, North and South Dakota, Iowa, and Wisconsin. And the 3 of us work in the Center for Youth Development. Each center has an associate dean and program leaders who work directly with regionally based educators. So you can see there's our state, and it's a large geographic state, which I know many of you are part of as well. But that will factor into some of the reasons we've developed a cohort model. So as I said, each center has an associate dean and program leaders that work with our regionally based educators, and we also have a director of operations. And then we have 7 campus-based content directors. So those are individuals that are on campus and they are content directors. We work regionally in teams that are geographically based. We have 29 extension educators that each have functions. So we have 7 functions, and just an example of some of the functions that our educators have. They could have supervision, program planning is a function, program operations, and civic engagement leadership. So those are examples and happen to be the ones that Amber and Trish have. We also have 2 educators that work directly in evaluation and distance learning. All of these positions are funded on state and federal funds. Our locally based program coordinators or program staff are University of Minnesota employees based and funded by a local county. We're fortunate to have over 115 locally based colleagues who are the face of the program. They work with all aspects of the local program, and we have positions funded in every county but 1. We lead the 4-H Youth Development Program, as well as provide youth worker training for other youth organizations. And in fact, we offered 103 trainings to over 37 professionals in the past year. In our center, we focus on 3 main program goals. Our youth goals are that youth will learn by developing passion in their area of interest, and youth will lead by being innovators and social change agents. Also important is our adult learning goal, which is when given effective research-based training and support, adults working with and on behalf of young people will create high-quality, culturally responsive learning environments. As we look at our history of onboarding, our center was on the front end of providing comprehensive onboarding for new employees. And since going to a regional system in 2004, onboarding has been led within regions and generally focused on our local program staff. And while there is a clear guide on the timeline and tasks to complete in onboarding, each geographic region determined the most effective way to deliver the materials to new staff. That process consisted of a series of topic-related meetings that shared immediate, essential elements of their work. And the entire onboarding process would last for around 6 months. And once they began that once they completed the onboarding, they would fully immerse themselves into executing the local 4-H program. So that aspect is very consistent to what we know about the research that youth development organizations tend to provide some limited procedural onboarding training, but it doesn't necessarily lack the opportunity to engage with others during the process. Another aspect that factored into our time frame, I'm just going back here, there we go. Another piece that we know is that the way that we did onboarding, they would tend to be completing onboarding right when, as you can see by this slide of the first year of employment, when they might be at that lowest stage of their employment because they've been anticipating, they've survived, and then they're kind of down like, I don't know what will be moving forward. So in a response, a team of Center for Youth Development professionals were charged to understand the staff development needs of our program coordinators, and we really focused our efforts on understanding the effectiveness of our organizational onboarding practice. So through data collection on an online survey tool, program coordinators claimed to feel they felt very overwhelmed with the intensity of information shared throughout onboarding. They felt the timing and relevance of the training was ill-assorted, and they also noted that there were many inconsistencies on regional delivery, just based on the varied levels of understanding from region to region. And they also expressed a sense of seclusion by working in a remote county office setting that maybe led to a decreased sense of belonging. So the other aspect that factored into our need to look at our practices was that we made changes to our hiring practice. And so we now hire our local program staff 3 times a year. And so we also needed to review our onboarding practices and make changes. And we've done that. We piloted those in January, and they're being implemented at this time. With that, I'll let Trish take over.
All right. So based on the...
Excuse me, this is Gwen, I'm sorry.
Yep.
Do you mind, we do have a question in the Q&A that's specific to one of the slides that had the map a few slides back. Could we maybe go back to that question? I'll let you know right there. Yep. So the question is, so on this map, what type of dot is which? So they just want a little bit of a description of this map.
Sure, that would be great. So the dots that are represented there, the diamond-shaped dots, are where our regional offices are located. So I think we have 15 at this point. We've had more, and we've moved some, but we have 15 regional offices, and that's where our regionally based extension educators are located in offices. And then our county, as you can see, and like I said, every county has an extension office, and we have funding for youth development, locally based staff in all of them except for the one in the far corner, Cook County, if you can see that. That's right on Lake Superior. So I think Amber's trying to move to it, but we have, yeah, right there. So that's the only one where we do not have locally funded staff, program staff.
All right. Well, I'm going to continue and note, based on the particular findings that Nancy had mentioned, we knew we needed to designate time and energy to those staff who were just completing their onboarding. these were staff who were feeling like they were getting lost in the shuffle after they'd been here for 6 months. They'd had some pretty one-on-one attention with the onboarding process. And so we started focusing on staff who'd been on board for 6 to 18 months, and they were still experiencing a lot of those firsts. And we knew they needed some additional training and support. So our first goal was to create an environment that was conducive to building relationships for these staff. We wanted to create that community of learning and that community of support for these individuals. And we knew it needed to be made up of their peers. If it were us as educators trying to come in and share our experiences, they weren't going to be the same experiences. So we wanted to make sure that these were staff who had been onboarded for a similar amount of time, thus the 6 to 18 months. We also knew that we wanted them to be mentors, and we wanted to involve other youth development leaders and educators who could share their knowledge, provide some insight, and also act as hosts for the various learning spaces that we provide. We know that there's research out there that talks about inadequate staff. When support is inadequate, our staff turnover can be higher, which means that as an organization, you are hiring and training new staff on a continual basis. And we wanted to move away from that. We also knew that supporting staff is more cost-effective than a more cost-effective choice for organizations. So we were championing this cohort model of delivery to provide more of that long-term support for our youth development staff who had completed the onboarding process. We wanted to have that cohort. We know cohorts are known for providing participants with a greater feeling of inclusiveness and also promoting collaboration. And we wanted that to be critical to their professional development as they were situated. If you looked at that map, our county is fairly large, or our state is fairly large, and our counties are spread out. And so our staff are usually at further distances from one another, and especially from educators or state level support. So we wanted to make sure that we were providing that as well. And we wanted to engage them in group learning opportunities. Another belief that helped to guide our vision was that we wanted to involve that integration of participatory integrative leadership. We felt it was critical to the success of additional training for our staff that we want them to own the experience by identifying the topics that they wanted to receive training on. We have them provide feedback and insight about the design modifications or how things change from year to year or cohort to cohort. And then we also wanted them to self-identify a project or issue that was meaningful to them, where they would where the content could be practiced immediately, not something that was we learn about it and then 10 months from now, a year from now, we put it into practice. But they're practicing this immediately, and therefore their leadership growth is being pushed. Our third goal was to bridge some of that disconnect between staff in those isolated geographic distant locations to other youth development professionals throughout our state. We wanted to ensure that we had a diverse range of facilitators and that they were there to teach on topics that are based on their own expertise, as well as meet the needs of our 4-H staff. So as a result of that, we have our Youth Development Learn and Lead cohort. And this cohort, is for our staff who have been with us for 6 to 18 months. We try to offer a hybrid learning situation where we have a mix of face-to-face and online learning opportunities. And then we're also incorporating an action learning projects, which we will talk about more as our presentation goes along. But this is that opportunity for them to engage in their learning on that meaningful topic and then put what they're learning into practice right away. To explain the cohort just a little more, it's an 8 months of training, both online and face-to-face. We start, typically we've started in September and we end in April. We have our participants actively lead portions of the experience, so they're providing some of the the introduction and reflection opportunities. We also have them involved in several Q&As where they are helping to share their learning with us, but also to help direct where we might go with the next session that they'll be meeting. We involve extension educators and state specialists that lead and support in partnership with the participants. They'll seek information from our participants before their session to make sure that their presentation is on target with what that group is wanting to learn. We have an action learning project. It's called our ALP, and it incorporates small group work. So not only are you in the larger cohort, but you are working with a smaller group of 3 to 4 individuals with similar topics to you. And that way they're able to mentor and support their colleagues as they are moving along with their action learning project. And also they have some continuous reflection that's going on and encouragement to help them attain that next step or next goal. And the Learn and Lead cohort is always evolving. The topics and schedules are changing to ensure that we're meeting participant needs. We conduct an evaluation on a regular basis and adjust the cohort topics or the cohort experience in order to meet those needs of our colleagues and provide the best cohort for that cohort experience for them. So why a cohort? Why was it essential for this group? So to ensure the first goal was met, we used the cohort for a learning structure. It was our essential learning structure. It was there to create a space where colleagues from across the state could meet, both program coordinator peers, but also extension educators and specialists. It's a platform for sharing resources and ideas, frustrations, and solutions. It was also an opportunity to share where things are located. When you're new, sometimes our website can be overwhelming, and so it's helping direct them to where resources would be for individuals. And this was a space for camaraderie. They were able to come together with peers. It was an overnight experience, and so they often joined together for meals. And but then during the times that we were together and in the off months, they were there to mentor and support and hold one another accountable, but also connect resources, connect knowledge and ideas. We know that cohorts provide participants with greater feeling of inclusiveness, and that's what we wanted to be able to provide with our cohort experience for our staff. The slide before you, you see our timeline and topic with starting in September. Sessions 1 and 2 are the 2-day retreat in September. And we talk about some of the strengths-based leadership. We introduce the Action Learning Project. We talk about Youth Development 101. We do ask that all of our staff come with youth development experience, but we do recognize that we need to cover what is youth development in the 4-H world and how do we talk about that with the Center for Youth Development. We also cover fiscal responsibility and some of our 4-H online basics. The important part of this is to really know and understand when they need information. And September starts to end our 4-H year and our fiscal year with 4-H, and so there's quite a bit of financial information that happens right there, and to help them feel less overwhelmed, we try to make sure that we're covering topics at a very timely situation for them. You can see in October we meet online, we talk about evaluation. November we're back face-to-face, and we're really working on relationship building and helping our new staff understand how important it is to build relationships. Again, that hybrid of online and face-to-face, so December and January, because in Minnesota, if you didn't know this, we have winter and not such great roads so at times. So we want to make sure that we were online and not forcing people to be out traveling. February still not always great, as we experienced this past year, but we do bring people together again online, and than face-to-face. And that the last meeting is where we always share the action learning projects, and we invite all the presenters in, any supervisors in, as well as other state staff to come in and listen to the hard work, to hear the struggles, to hear the challenges, to hear the positive impacts and outcomes that have happened through these action learning projects. So the face-to-face and the online mix have seemed to work really well, and we try to switch up the meeting locations because our state is large, and for some people it is a 7-hour drive to the cities for any meetings that we might have there, and we want to hopefully alleviate any of the travel experiences by shortening some of that.
All right, well, good morning or afternoon, I guess, based on wherever you might be in the world. And thank you all for your patience, as apparently I relearned how to use PowerPoint this morning. So thanks to Nancy and Trish for setting up kind of the basics about why we started this cohort, and just like the nuts and bolts of it. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the specifics that we, specific tools and resources that we're utilizing to ensure that this is a really useful tool for our staff. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about evaluation results as well. So as Trish mentioned, we use the hybrid model. We think that it's been really important for us in terms of ensuring and safeguarding participant involvement. So we want to make sure that people are able to contribute, able to be involved, no matter where they're from in the state, and to limit some of the monetary expenses that come along with meeting face-to-face. So we're willing to invest in it to some extent, but then we also know that we need to be savvy with the way that we execute this. And so I just was going to share a couple of the tools that we use. Google Sites, of course, has been something that we utilize in terms of just sharing information, especially logistical information. We use Google Hangouts for small group connects, which Trish mentioned a little bit about. And then we've been using Flipgrid, and I don't know how many of you are familiar with Flipgrid, but it's a really cool way of engaging participants together in a shared space. You present a question. It could be a question around how they're growing with their leadership, or how they are, any issues that they might be having with county fairs or whatever it might be. And then they can pose a quick snippet of a video through the Flipgrid site. It's free for educators to use, and they can respond to each other via video. And so that's just one. It was a wildly popular addition to our meetings, and it really does provide a space for reflective conversation in a really non-invasive way. It also gets people familiar with seeing themselves on camera, so they can maybe execute meetings in their home counties if that works for them. And we've noticed that participation in our Flipgrid posts are 10 times more active than what we saw when we originally started the cohort and we just utilized Moodle. And so for us, that's a really big win. And so Trish also talked a little bit about the incorporation of integrative leadership. And so we knew that we want to build relationships and we want to make sure that we're sharing timely topics, but we also wanted our program coordinators to have an opportunity to grow in their leadership skills. And so knowing that leadership development was a primary goal of our program, we also recognize that the richest resource that we had were the program coordinators and staff that were participants. They were the ones that had the information to share. They could let us know what places they really needed to focus on, and we wanted to ensure that we were meeting their needs to the full extent. So integrative leadership was used as the core learning base. The underlying philosophy of a cohort, like we've talked about, is that learners become empowered to have a sense of ownership for their own professional development. And so we really wanted to be intentional about providing a space for participants to engage in integrative leadership. That's why we incorporated this action learning project. And as Trish mentioned, it's really the thing that bridges all of our trainings together. It bridges the experience that a program coordinator is bringing to the cohort, and it provides a space to really push a learner out of their typical comfort zone and apply tools and training that they're gaining in the cohort to a real life situation. The very practical definition of an action learning project is that it's a practical, high impact way to develop one's leadership or one's ability to think and lead across an organization by applying what they've learned throughout the training. So a couple of ALP examples, just to give you an idea of what people have focused on. proactive opportunities like reaching a new audience, solutions to an issue like working to heal an unhealthy committee, strategic planning, so improving processes to make sure that work is more efficient and or effective, and reorganization, so maybe shifting roles or work to volunteers or sunsetting programs. Participants choose a project based on a pressing issue or idea from their local program context. So that is where we see that the value and the buy-in to the process is coming in. Each project centers on a real opportunity that adds value to both their county, but to the organization as a whole. We want to make sure that it is aligned with our strategic plan and our overall goals of the Center for Youth Development. They connect with small groups of peers, like we mentioned, and that helps to keep them accountable all year long. So our cohort lasts for 8 months, and when they are able to connect with peers who have similar projects as they do, they can share resources and ideas, and they push each other along the way to ensure that there's momentum and movement happening. And then we also offer an optional mentor component, and we do that by pairing participants with staff that are well positioned to support them on their journey. Mentors are typically not people that they work with on a regular basis. We want to try and expand that pool of people that they know within our state. They provide desired insight and resources for the participant while building opportunities to connect with new people and learn new ideas. And the other thing that we have really been aware of and intentional about, especially in regards to integrative leadership, is incorporating some of these art of hosting practices. And so if you don't know, art of hosting is an approach to leadership, and it scales up from, just personal leadership all the way to systemic leadership using personal practice, dialogue, and facilitation. And it involves a lot of co-creation of agendas, co-creation of program planning, and that's used to address challenges. For us, we present the challenge as everybody's individual action learning project, and so we provide that space for them to work towards an issue or a challenge in their community context. But in general, the challenge for us, of course, was ensuring that our staff felt like they were supported, hoping that we are retaining program coordinators and making sure that they feel like they've gotten what they need to do the job that they have been hired to do, and really making sure that our staff are not feeling isolated. And so art of hosting practices like using open space technology and appreciative inquiry have really been key components to ensuring that we hit these marks. And another way that we ensure that there's a lot of insight coming from participants themselves is that we modify the cohort annually. We've done this now, we're on our 5th iteration of the cohort, and not one cohort has ever looked the same. We constantly modify locations, topics, session formats, even start end times based on what we learned from past participants and current participants. It's a really important part about this process, and to ensure that everybody who is participating in this training is getting what they need, and that we are helping them own and build the training in partnership with us as hosts. This is just a really quick slide of some of the different modifications that we've made, breaking action learning project small groups up by project topics rather than just having them like with their region staff colleagues, for instance. We've included a mentor option based on feedback that we've received. We are doing our best to incorporate PC voice as much as possible, and I think we're even doing more of that as we move forward with our cohort this next year, and a variety of other things, exploring an alternative to Moodle. People didn't really like that as our platform, and so we changed that. So this is just to show that we really have been taking that feedback and putting it to use. So we have also been doing a lot of evaluation on our training, the Anchor cohort. So these results is 88% of participants that have participated from 2015 to 2018. And what we've seen is that 97% of cohort participants said that they built connections with colleagues. 100% of our participants said that they were able to have influenced professional relationships through sharing and discussion. 95% agreed that they received relevant and research-based content that applied to their role. and 89% believe that they build tangible skills that can be immediately applied to their role. For us, these are wins. We feel like these were some of the goals that we set at the very beginning, and we wanted to make sure that people were reaching these goals, and these are high percentages, and we're excited to be able to share those. A few other things that we've learned: 97% of participants felt like our program content was relevant. So going back to some of the topics that Trish highlighted, we feel like we kind of hit the mark with some of those, but we constantly modify them from year to year to ensure that they're relevant. Participants are stating that they're able to apply what they learned to their work. They're changing their practices based on what they learned, and they have a deeper understanding of the topics. So, you know, then going back to what Nancy had mentioned about onboarding, we were learning that people were learning this information, but it was kind of going in one ear and maybe out the other because they weren't practicing it right away. And at least with this cohort opportunity, it's expanding on what we're now doing with onboarding, and it's helping to apply information to current practices. A few other evaluation results: again, people were connecting with their colleagues, gaining new resources, applying new ideas. They gained motivation to grow their program, which for us is a really important thing, to think about how we're reaching our new audiences. And they were building connections that were being sustained outside of the cohort. And we also did some longitudinal discussions with past cohort participants to find out, are you still, you know, connecting with your cohort peers? And they said yes. So that was great. And finally, in terms of results, employee engagement, we learned that we were enhancing our employee engagement based on building these relationships with our staff. And so 100% of our cohort participants felt like they were in a welcoming space, they belonged in the cohort, and they had a place to share their thoughts and opinions.
All right, so we've spent a lot of time talking about our new staff, and based on the survey that we had completed for experienced staff, we had tried to better understand what our experienced staff needed. And after a few years of anchor cohort under our belt, we knew now we needed to start focusing on our more experienced staff, those with 4+ years experience and 4+ years on staff with our organization. So with the success of our initial cohort, we recognized that this learning model would be the preferred model of training for most of what we were going to do within the Center for Youth Development and for local youth development professionals. And we wanted to establish cohorts of learning as ongoing long-term model for staff development, and felt we could do that with our experienced staff as well. And so we proposed an implementation of 3 levels of cohorts. So we would have our Learn and Lead onboarding cohort. So that's from when you were hired until 6 months of employment. And then we would go on to our Learn and Lead cohort for anchor, and that would be 6 months of employment to 18 months, and then one for our more experienced staff. So those who have spent 4 or more years in their role. And so in 2018, we kicked off the Sustain cohort, and it was developed and piloted to meet the needs of our experienced staff, so be able to dig a little deeper into some of our topics, not give them they didn't need to be anchored in what they were learning, but they needed to be sustained and be able to dive a little deeper into particular topics like volunteer development, more into maybe human resources and supervising summer interns. So we wanted to make sure that it was an experience that would meet their needs and not be below what they needed or too far above what they needed. But again, we also focused on relationship building, because we knew that no matter what, relationships and working with relationships, whether it's through communities or committees or partners, we needed to be able to build that with our staff. So our Learn and Lead Sustain cohort is a compilation of staff development topics that our 4-H program coordinators identified as important to them to get their job done. And again, it's a mixture of program coordinators from across the state. We wanted to make sure each of our regions were covered with staff representatives so that they had that mix of experiences and also the mix of knowledge that they bring to the organization. So topics for this past cohort were program planning, Managing the human and fiscal resources, we worked on building relationships, engaging volunteers, enhancing diversity, and then we also allowed them to do an action learning project where they explored a topic of their choice a bit further. Again, the content was important, but it was really about the experience of the work and the commonality that the staff had together. They were able to build connections and deepen their networking through our cohort experience as well. As we move forward, we've recognized with this first one that our cohort experience may need to look a little different for our more experienced staff members, and that we are looking at learning tracks. And that came directly from these past participants. So our upcoming tracks will be around volunteer development. After a day spent with our volunteer specialist in Minnesota, our sustained cohort felt strongly that we need to spend a good chunk of time just learning and developing ourselves in working with volunteers and managing volunteers and leading volunteers. So we have decided to start focusing in tracks of volunteer development, evaluation, and reporting. We're also looking at a teaching and facilitating track for our more experienced staff so that they can develop those particular skills in themselves, or really work on areas that they feel they need some extra work.
Right. Thank you, and thanks for all the questions, and I will keep answering them as I can after I'm done talking. So as we wrap up our time that we have to share about the YD Learn and Lead cohorts in Minnesota, just, all cohort learning, it doesn't always, there's always challenges, but, one of the things that we really tried to do, and I would say Trish and Amber have done a fantastic job taking that feedback from the program coordinators and implementing those changes. But one of the things that happened is everybody said, oh, we're going to put that in Learn and Lead Anchor. We're going to add that. So a lot of people kept saying we want more things added to it. And so we've been working on that. But some of the things, obviously, that we're a large geographic state, so travel on time is sometimes a challenge, especially when our local staff are on a hourly basis, and so if they're full-time, it's 40 hours, and some of them are not, and so that sometimes is a challenge too. So we have to continue to look at that, and that's why we do the face-to-face and the online. We also know that not all topics are applicable to all staff. We have some program coordinators that have specific roles, and so it may not always hit the mark with them. The other piece is that the Action Learning Project may seem very intense and can be confusing at the beginning, but I think we've done a really nice job of trying to move that and help people understand it's part of the work and that they should think about something that they're working on and they want to improve in their program. And finally, building a team. So overwhelmingly, people have said the opportunity to connect with others that they don't work with directly in their regions or next door, that has been really, really great. However, there may be times when there are cliques and there's small groups that come together that we might like to change that. So sometimes, as we know with any team, that it works, and sometimes it doesn't work as well. Next steps. So as we said, the new onboarding cohort, our new onboarding. So we've talked a lot about our anchor, and Trish talked about sustain. So our new onboarding cohort was piloted starting in January of 2019. And then we started another group in late May. So our hires start in late January, late May, and late September. And so as we evaluate our new onboarding cohort to better understand really the impact of all three cohort structures, our center was very optimistic that this extended model of colleague cohesion, I should say, will instill a welcoming sense of belonging to the Center for Youth Development and really leading to higher retention and more positive employee engagement. When we look at recommendations for the future, I think one of the things that we think is very important is that we know that it's a challenge when people are remotely based. And so that the cohort learning model is really our preferred model of learning. So they really enhance professional youth worker relationships, and they foster that learning community through networking and collaborative activities. So we believe that this cohort model has really been built very deliberately and really brings colleagues together. And we think that it has a lot of potential to positively impact the staff development practices and extension and other youth development organizations. And with that, we have a couple slides that just highlight our references, and I know that the questions have been coming in, and we just want to thank you for spending time listening to how we have moved the cohort learning approach in Minnesota in the Center for Youth Development to really onboard and to further develop the learning and cohesiveness of our colleagues.
We do have one question that we had come in through the chat. The question is, how did you get buy-in from extension staff and extension administrators?
I'll just start off with that. We had a staff development team within youth development, and so both Trish and Amber have served on that. But one of the pieces is that we really looked at, we had a strong onboarding component, and one of the pieces is, what do we need to do next? And we knew, and actually I remember sending a survey out like, would you come to campus again for 4 days of learning? And program coordinators didn't want to do that, but we really knew there was a need for further learning and how important it is. So I don't believe it was really that challenging. I think that we presented that we wanted to do this, and the feedback immediately really supported that there was a need to do this. So there was not a debate, I would say, for any administration within our center, and I think nor extension-wide, that we really pay attention to how we are developing our colleagues.
Are other program areas, such as ag and so forth, are they doing cohorts as well?
Yeah, I did send one message back regarding that. So I would say extension-wide, we have had a cohort called Foundations for Success, and that's for new educator or professional academic colleagues, and that really focuses on learning about the organization. And Amber was part of that when she was new, and that brought together people from all 4 centers, as well as our promotion action group, and that is a group that's cross-center that is led extension-wide to really look and prepare people for our academic promotion. The other centers, I would say I'm not aware of the cohort learning that they're doing and their onboarding. I know some of the onboarding practices, but Trish and Amber might know more, but I don't believe they have the cohort learning developed as we have in the Center for Youth Development. They don't have as many locally based staff. So our center has the most locally based staff. Agriculture, food, and natural resources would have the second level, but I would say we have, a lot of colleagues, the majority, over half, more than half of our colleagues are locally based. And so it is really important for us that we invest our time into ensuring they have the training that's needed.
I think at this point, I would like to turn the presentation over to our next speaker.
Thank you. Well, good morning or afternoon. It's nice to be here today, and I have been on the side communicating with my colleague here in Cooperative Extension's Program Development and in our in our office and Extension Administration, Kim Fleming. Just to say that the cohort experience that was just described and what I'm going to be describing could have been twins separated at birth. Both describing some cohort experiences and many similarities, which you're going to see. But the topical area, the focus in our audience is slightly different. So in this session, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Program Development Leadership Cohort that we have in New York State at Cornell University. It's a blended learning program for Cornell Cooperative Extension senior level staff. So it's cross-program areas, senior level staff meeting program leaders, issue leaders, executive directors, any of the staff that are really intended to build plans of work, write proposals, lead programmatic efforts in counties. So that's going to be our focus today. So before we go too far, if in case we haven't had a chance to meet before, I'm going to just introduce myself a little bit. The Program Development Specialist for Cornell Cooperative Extension's Administration. And I've worked for Extension for about 30 years, starting with boots on the ground as an IPM scout, working as an environmental educator in several counties, worked in the state 4-H office for about 14 years, leading STEM programs. And in the last 8 years, I've worked in extension administration, supervising our reporting and staff development around program development process or instructional design process. So about 5 years ago, I went back to school. I had a master's degree in environmental engineering, which I wasn't really using that much in my current career. But I went back to school to study instructional design and online learning because we were doing a lot of things online. And so that experience, that learning really shaped and influenced what we offer and how we offer it in New York State. So enough about me. I'm going to ask a few questions of you. So we have a poll, and so we've been talking about cohort learning. Obviously you're on because you're interested in cohort learning, and I'm interested to know, does your land-grant institution offer professional development for staff who develop programs or write proposals? So there's a couple of different options there. Yes, they do it by webinar. Yes, they do it by online learning. Yes, it's face-to-face. Yes, some combination. No, not at all. Or we used to, but we're not at this time. And if your answer was yes, you are offering something, I'm interested to know if it's cohort based, because just watching our our Minnesota colleagues here, I was impressed with, like I said, how similar our experiences have been. It looks like a number of states are offering a combination of methodology for reaching out and offering professional development around program development or instructional design. A few said that they used to, but not at this time. And there's a few that are doing it in a cohort-based model. So great, thank you. All right. So what I'm going to be telling you about is our current iteration of program development around, or professional development around program development. We have done, talked about program development models, taught our staff about program development models in a number of ways. Like I said, I worked for Extension for about 30 years. And when I first started, it was oftentimes integrated into kind of every professional development experience. We talked about, assessing needs and designing objectives and so on and so forth. And then for a while, there was a cohort experience, but it was a face-to-face experience. And then for a while, we didn't really have much of a budget for traveling, so everything just shrank down to as you need it, courses online, webinars, resources that we offered, but not a lot of interaction. And we realized that there was a number of indicators really that helped to point to the fact that we needed some kind of a refresh. So I'm going to walk you through the process that we use to redevelop our design, and then tell you a little bit about the approach that we use right now. So the first step was, we kind of lived through this program development or instructional design process. We did a needs analysis, and it was mostly qualitative, lots of conversations with staff, with executive directors, asking the same questions and then documenting the responses so that a team of us could kind of poke through there and really better understand what people were feeling. And you know, the intention of that, it was, you know, very intentional to ask those questions and do it in a qualitative way, because we wanted to help people understand that Extension Administration cared about their experiences, and we also wanted to plant the seed that, you know, some changes are coming, so stay tuned. We understand that you have some needs. So this is an example of some of the comments that came up consistently. Some of the comments were that staff needed better, consistent training, or that programs are a product. And this is one that I really like. We do a lot of things in Extension, but one of the, you know, the reason that we exist is educational programs. So one of our staff members said, program is our product, and it's important that we know how to develop programs. Consistent planning gets consistent results. Senior staff should be able to use program models to plan, implement, and evaluate programs and model this process for others. And staff need to know one another beyond the county lines. And so I think that those 5 examples really give a good overview of the kinds of things that people were feeling. They needed to feel connected. They needed to understand the process. Most of the staff that we hire, and it's probably true in your states as well, are like really intense and know a lot about their subject area, but most of them don't come from an education background. So it's just like hiring faculty at a university. Their background is in subject matter. They're a subject matter expert, but not necessarily an educator. So some training on how to do that and plan consistently to get consistent results is important. So we boiled down the gap, right, to the fact that senior staff need to be able to write program plans and proposals. I don't know about other states, but in New York State, most of our counties are not using only federal funds or state funds in order to exist. They're writing a lot of proposals, and we wanted to be able to help them to do that so that they could get funding to do their educational programs. So we want them to be able to write their program plans so we know what they're doing, and write proposals so that they can get funding. We also want them to not just understand what inclusivity and diversity is, but to be able to plan for that so that their programs meet diverse audiences and are just connected with all of the communities within their counties. We want them to regularly evaluate. So, you know, I mean, oftentimes forms are used at the end of workshops and trainings, but we really wanted to understand what behavior changes were like, and we want our senior level staff to know to ask those kinds of questions. And developing mentoring relationships with colleagues. So the staff that we were interested in training were those that would be supporting other staff and training other staff. So they needed to be comfortable advising other staff how to use a program model to get consistent results. And there was also the reality, a huge gap, understanding that the current training resources that we have were just underutilized. There were a lot of as you need it kinds of resources out there, but I think I heard Minnesota say that sometimes people don't know where to find information on the website because there's so much information. We do good at providing information, but oftentimes it's too much. So the first thing we did was we took a deeper dive, looking at what our staff was made up of, you know, just in terms of the demographics. We looked at our pulled data on our senior level leaders, and you know, some of these are obvious. Of course, they're adult learners. Most of them were subject matter experts, so their degrees were in a subject matter and not in education. All of them, given the position description on our senior level leaders, they have to have a master's degree or higher. So we know that they're there in their career. They often supervise other staff, and they have other administrative roles, which may include grant writing. An average of 14 years of experience working for Cornell Cooperative Extension. and an average age of 49. So we did this 4 years ago. We have been doing the program development leadership cohort for 4 years now. So when we first were starting to dive in and better understand who the staff were that we are going to be providing professional development for, the average age is 49. If we did it now, it might be a little bit younger just because of staff turnover, but these are kind of some of the statistics that we came up with. And, obviously they're busy. They're very busy people, especially the staff that have been on board for a while. They have their own way of doing business, their own work that they're, that they're busy doing. And so trying to build training for this particular group of staff we knew was going to be a little bit of a challenge. So we broke down the staff. If we looked at all of our staff that were senior level staff, we kind of thought about them in two different learner personas, right? As we wanted to consider what to create for them, we wanted to better understand what their motivations were and why they might dive into new staff or to staff development around the program development or instructional design process. So we gave them clever names. There's been there and new to it all, right? So been there has been there for a long time staffer, lots of experiences. What would motivate them to dive in and take the time for some professional development? And that is just a time to climb the career ladder, stay in extension, but move about in extension. So what would give them the tools to be able to do that? So we kind of had that as a consideration. And then new to it all, new hire, less experience, then direct reports often. So the newer staff wants to know how to do his or her job and, just wants to be, especially when they're newer to the role, they want to be able to understand that, before they are so busy that they, that they can't surface to breathe. So all of that helped us to develop some learner objectives, right? So our learning objectives were that by the end of the cohort, learners were going to be able to identify, locate, and apply relevant program planning resources. So this goes back to a comment about, there's so many resources on our website, so many underutilized resources often. That was one of our objectives. We want people to be able to figure out that they need a resource, locate it, and then apply those relevant resources. To identify and recruit new audiences. So from a diversity and inclusivity perspective, to build that in as not only to be able to do that, but to actually to do that in the realm of their normal work. Write a local plan of work or model plan proposal for a project that includes needs assessment, developing outcomes, designing a program that's going to meet the needs of their audiences, implementation, having a good implementation plan and an evaluation strategy, and all of that within the realm of our statewide plan of work. So that's the other role that I do, is a lot of our accountability stuff and reporting. So I'm very interested to make sure that our staff are kind of keeping that in consideration as they plan and they report on the work that they're doing. We also wanted them to be able to demonstrate how to mentor colleagues and to seek collegial feedback. So to work out loud, to do kind of what we're doing right now, to push their ideas out there and then be open to thoughts and considerations and feedback. And finally, preparing a program pitch to share a program plan with other people. So not just that we wanted this professional development experience, not just to learn about something, build skills and knowledge, but we wanted to prepare them for putting it into action. So Action Learning Project of Minnesota is another reason why this really felt like we were twins separated at birth. So, you know, based on all the learning objectives and all the work that we did, we created a message design, so a way of like simplifying what we were trying to do so that we could talk with our staff and our educators a little bit about the story of what we want this professional development, the program development leadership cohort to be. So basically we said knowledge, skills, practice, and what we're really trying to build is that competent and confident educator, and all of that in the realm of a human experience. Social, you know, building in thinking about adult learning theory and social learning theory. So we wanted both of those things to really shape the program development leadership cohort. All right, so that all led to kind of a three-tiered approach. One, the whole practice thing. We knew that it wasn't a short-term, you know, face-to-face 5-day experience that we were going to build. We wanted something that was going to take place over a period of time. We heard from staff when we were doing qualitative interviews that it couldn't be too long. You know, we heard from staff that they didn't want it to be too short. So we settled on a 4-month period. So PDLC takes place the last 4 years. It's taken place from January until April. So that timing seems a little bit better than things in the summer months, especially for our youth development educators and our ag educators. We bookend it with 2 days on campus. So the beginning and the end are both on-campus events where people can meet each other and greet each other and you know, create a certain level of fellowship together. But we also include Zoom meetings and independent follow-up. So we also use small groups within the cohort. And participants use Zoom. It says WebEx here because originally it was WebEx. Zoom, and we're using Moodle, and in some cases social media to really fully engage with each other. And then our final campus event includes a presentation to campus partners from our program leaders. So here's another way of looking at it. Asynchronous Moodle content, right? That includes some concept checks, staff connected in small groups for informal discussion, and assignments. We'll take a look at the way that is built and what those assignments look like, but they kind of build up to the real project, because the cohort is asked to develop a project while they're learning. So they pick a project first, and as they go through each of the topics, they're asked to reflect on the thing that they're interested in doing and develop their response, and then connect with one another, reflect on their answers, and so on and so forth. So the asynchronous Moodle course is a super good way of delivering the actual content. And then we have Zoom meetings that are held to provide a chance for for all of the staff to connect. We cover, the first thing we cover every time we have a Zoom meeting is any technical questions or content questions. The Moodle thing is great, it works well, but it's not everybody's baby, and you know, I realize that and recognize that I really enjoy that, but not everybody enjoys that. So we take some time at the beginning of any time that we meet by Zoom to cover technical content questions. And then we kind of go around the room, just like if we were all together, to build some cohort dynamics, and try to keep it as social and as light as possible, so that people continue to build that that connection with each other and become, and I think our Minnesota colleagues said, you know, accountability partners, and that's exactly how we think of cohort and social learning. Is you know, you're building accountability partners so that you're asking each other questions, which may not feel it may not feel as, I don't know, concerning as accountability, but you don't want to let your colleagues down. So we found that really works very, very well, is helping to build those connections so that people are, you know, holding each other to this higher standard. And then our colleagues on Zoom can also report to each other and present on progress and talk about the things, the issues and the concerns they might have if it's in a topic that we're working on or related to the project that they are working on. So the Zoom meetings are typically 2 hours, like a 10 to noon, and they're roughly every 2 to 3 weeks throughout the cohort experience, depending on the timing of everything else. But we set those up at the beginning. And then the 2 face-to-face meetings are a good way to cover content a little deeper. So one of the focus areas I mentioned, being diversity and inclusion, is it's a little harder to cover some of that content by the Moodle course. So we found that really focusing in on that and on evaluation and evaluation strategies when we are face-to-face, it becomes a little less, people are a little more able to dive in because they're topics that may be harder for staff to embrace. And then the networking opportunities with, teamwork and team building, and also connecting with other staff on campus, because those face-to-face meetings are tied to our campus staff, or are tied to campus. It really works well to bring some of our campus partners together. And we use that time when they're face-to-face to present ideas to outside colleagues so that they're sharing their thoughts, working out loud, helping other people, just kind of practicing talking about the things that they're learning so that they're getting feedback and incorporating that into the work that they do. I'm not going to spend an awful lot of time on these next few slides, but I just want to share a little bit that we pulled together a logic model as we were developing this that really helped us to, we focused in on the outcomes, and that helped us to understand, okay, when it comes to skill building, what are the things that we're going to include, and how are we going to do that? So in skill building, we knew that we wanted to strengthen skills and knowledge in writing program proposals and program plans. So we knew that we wanted to cover needs assessment, designing objectives, developing educational strategies, planning implementation, planning evaluation, and planning report and communication strategy. And when we thought, well, how are we going to do that best? Some of it was on-campus meeting, and some of it was skill building modules that include assignments and discussions, so interaction and engagement. And then we did the same thing as we considered, how are we going to build collegial mentoring, all right? And how are we going to develop our projects? So we thought through the outcomes, considered what the topics were going to be to get them there, and then what experiences are best. And so in the pieces that I'll share that'll be on the website, I have a logic model that kind of spells all this out if it's of interest, and there is also our syllabus, which includes all of the detail for our staff as well. So we got past developing objectives, and we started thinking about how are we going to implement this. We knew that we had to consider promotion and recruitment, the course syllabus, and then developing online course content, face-to-face events, web meetings, and the relevant project development. So again, that's very similar to the action learning project. We knew that we wanted to include a relevant component because that, is very important to, adult learning theory, right? We needed to make sure that everything that we did was completely relevant to our participants and our staff so that they could tune in and pay attention. And, we wanted them to change their behaviors and adopt the process that we were sharing. So this is just examples of, there's a promo that we have used. We had a little video promo that we pushed out a little bit by social media also. And we have a blended learning experience syllabus about PDLC that, just so that staff who were interested or who we thought should be interested could see what they were getting themselves into. Spells out the course description and the outcomes and what the expectations are for staff. All right. So, you know, I think most folks have developed things like face-to-face training, and you know, most of us have facilitated some kind of online meetings, but the technology and the Moodle piece may be new or different, or something that you know, the methodology that we use may be slightly different. So that's what I'm going to focus in on next, because you know, the technology, the instructional design and online learning, I mentioned that I went back to school and got a a different degree during the time that we were developing this. That really helped to shape kind of what our offerings were. And you know, at one point we were sort of shy about offering online learning to our staff, because I'm not sure why. I think because there was a concern that staff would push back or not want to adopt a new practice, or you know, at some point we just said, hey, we're doing this. We use Moodle as our learning management system here in New York State. We know how to do this. It's a great way to have the content available 24/7, and it's a good way to encourage engagement if we do it right. So that's what I'm going to tell you a little bit about. So at this point, I am going to just ask that, you know, some of this may be not very different than some of the experiences that you're offering in your state. So I want to encourage you, if you have questions, please do ask them in the Q&A. But if you have thoughts or suggestions, or want to share that you're doing something, you know, the same way, or you know, a different idea that you have, please do share that in the chat, just so we can continue to, you know, I'm trying not to say that I'm the only one that knows how to do this stuff. A lot of us have done some online learning with Moodle and other learning management systems also. So please, and I mean, I'll encourage you to use the chat. And all right, so what you see on the screen now is just the page. This is our opening page for PDLC in Moodle. I'm just going to point out a couple of things, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about the successes that we have, you know, found in, you know, observations about what works and what doesn't work. So within most learning management systems, there's something called a news forum or announcements. Beautiful feature. Reason why is anytime you put something in the news forum, it's only typically it's only the teachers that can put something in the announcements, this opening news forum, and they get cataloged, right? So you can have them show up on the page, so it doesn't get lost in the sauce, it doesn't get lost in email. It does go to the email of anybody that's in the course. So we found that as a great way to push out messages to make sure that our cohort was together and everybody was getting the same information. We used the topic feature in Moodle so that the information was released by topic, and we used the ADDIE model, assessing needs, designing objectives, developing design, and implementation and evaluation. That was the primary structure for our topics, and we also included diversity and inclusion in there as well as topics. So, you know, and then we asked our staff, you know, as you go through a topic, you know, the assignments related to the topic were related to their own individual project. So they were beginning to build their final project. Again, this is a lot like the Action Learning Project of Minnesota's. They're beginning to build their own project as they're going through the course. All right, we provided some helpful links, and I'll show you a couple of the other features that we included as well. So noted best practices, communicate regularly. We use the Moodle announcements, as I said, creating a peer-to-peer learning environment. So we wanted to, you know, not to be a sage on the stage, but a guide on the side. We wanted to make sure that all of the staff that were involved knew that they had something to contribute, and as they learned, they should be sharing. So for that, we used Moodle, Flipgrid. So I know Minnesota said Flipgrid. We used Flipgrid as well. Really found it to be a super way for people to engage with one another, get to know personalities that you can't always feel in a, in a forum response. Sometimes you don't even feel in a face-to-face setting if it's not set up correctly, right? And we developed small groups so that they really got to know one another and relied on one another for experiences. We found providing clear and concise information and directions was like imperative. And so some of these observations came over the course of years. So year one, we realized, okay, the directions have to be a lot more clear because not everybody has used Moodle before, and concise because too many words lost in the sauce again. So we started including the syllabus and including badging, and we'll take a look at that in a minute as well. So every time you complete a topic, a participant receives a badge, and when they've completed all of the topics and the experiences in PDLC, they get a final badge and a completion certificate. So it just kind of formalizes the thank you for participating, here's what you have left to do, and here's what what I'm done with, because everybody is super busy. I felt like it was super important to include playful, light, human interactions. So every meeting, web meeting that we had, we did warm-ups, like icebreakers, very similar to if you had a 4-H club starting out, vanilla or chocolate ice cream, or what's your favorite activity for this time of the year, or just something to lighten it up a little bit, not feel so serious. And we really got to know each other better that way. It didn't take an awful lot of time, brought some smile to people's faces even though they were busy with other things, and they had to squeeze this in. So I can't say enough about how important that was. The small groups was super important also in helping people to interact and feel like a cohesive cohort. And then there's something, and I don't have a visual of this one, but there's something in Moodle called the leaderboard that I thought was kind of a funny thing, but one of my colleagues here in Extension Administration suggested trying it out. It's called Level Up. And basically it shows who has been in the system the most, who's interacted with it the most. When I say the system, I mean Moodle. And other people can kind of see where that's at. So if we had an educator that was kind of struggling with the technology, we would look together when we were on one of those meetings, like, okay, who's at the top of the leaderboard? And well, that's the person you should ask. If you have a question, you should talk to Jim. And we found out who was super competitive in that process because people wanted to be at the top of the leaderboard. It was very, it was eye-opening and fun and light and playful. We also found making scheduling simple. So, boy, at the beginning of my career, people gave me a list of dates. I'd put them in my calendar, done, right? Life is a little more complicated right now. We have lots of things that everybody is doing. And we found that people were sometimes missing, like, when's the next meeting again? Even if we gave them dates ahead of time or that was all in the syllabus. So at this point, we just, we send Outlook invitations to everybody for everything. Boom, we know what's going on and who's going to be there, and it works like a charm. We also take, regularly share the big picture plans, whether it's the logic model or the syllabus. It's modeling this program development process and helps folks to understand why that might be helpful. And I think it's been helpful to them to understand, like, why are we doing this again? Or what are the topics that we're going to cover? Making learning relevant. Again, I said before, it's an adult learning theory concept to, make sure that everything is relevant. And we do that with our self-selected project, much like the Action Learning Project. I keep saying that because I think that's a great title. And if I say it again, I might actually remember. And then we help learners to monitor their own progress. So there's self-checkoffs in Moodle and other learning management systems so that you can monitor your progress. If there are questions that are required, we are using something called H5P for integration. It's like quizzing. You know, you can do a whole bunch of things within H5P, so we use that. And badging. So again, the badging is a nice visual way, and we'll take a look at what some of the badging that we're using looks like, so you can see that. Flipgrid, video forums, wonderful way, just as our Minnesota colleagues said, announcements to send to those who register. So, you know, anybody that's in the course receives regular announcements through email, and then they can find them, as I mentioned on the other page. So these are examples of some badging that we use. You know, this is actually from a different course, but you know, you can see for per topic, they're receiving a badge, and then when they complete something, they're receiving another badge. And the badges, you know, if anybody has using badges or creating badges or has any questions about that, I am happy to share with you what we've done. Here's an example of our relevant projects. So for our relevant projects, we ask them to develop their project on using the strategy of, you know, thinking through ADDIE, assessing needs and developing their objectives and so on and so forth. And we create a one-pager for them. So one page designed so that everything looks the same. It's all part of the program development leadership cohort. They have them to hand out to people as they're continuing to talk about their project. And on the day of their presentation, during the last face-to-face, they have their one-pagers to give out. All right, so just a couple more slides, results. So we're 4 years in, we have 60 senior program. I don't think I mentioned we have only had, we have limited it to 15 participants per PDLC, just considering that we weren't really sure how much TLC it was going to need per staff member. So it's myself, my colleague Kim Fleming, and my colleague Eduardo Gonzalez Jr. who shepherd this this group. We weren't sure how much we could handle. So we've limited it so far to 15 per year. So far 60 have gone through it. We are seeing people move into other roles. So our veteran members who, you know, that was one of our concepts at first, is we wanted to help some of our veteran staff to be able to move up and through the system. We wanted to help them to develop projects that would receive funding because they knew how to demonstrate that they went through due process to propose that. So several have received, have developed fundable and funded projects. And then many presentations that we've seen at conferences include instructional design frameworks, and, you know, also these former staff saying, this is, you know, I learned about this through the program development leadership cohort. And more important than that, they are connecting with their colleagues and letting them know about the process they use to develop their program. And the collegial network also. So this is a picture of our team from this last spring that graduated. One of our team members was not able to be there in person, so she, you know, zoomed in to the meeting full time. Really hard probably to be at a face-to-face meeting but not be there, but we were open to trying to you know, help her through that. Challenges, you know, as you would expect, people are busy. They sign on even though knowing it's roughly 40 hours of professional development, but just that wasn't reality until they got there. So we haven't really lost too many members after the start, but it happens. Making sure that they have supervisor support. ED is executive director. We have executive directors in every county in New York State for cooperative extension. So our senior leader staff really need their executive director support in order to have the time available to work on this. And participant motivation varies. So we tried to be very strategic about how to keep people engaged, involved, keep it simple so that it was cognitively they knew exactly what they needed to do and were able to do it. So time. Yeah. And just some ideas for moving forward. We've, and these are all question marks at the end because we really haven't done anything with this, but they are considerations that we've thought about. Do we seek graduate credit for people that participate in this, in case anybody wants it? Do we go with a larger class size, or do we risk, not having the cohort be a cohort? Do we offer it as individual or coaching option, a DIY experience, allowing them to at least use the materials and then maybe participate as a cohort? And most importantly, do we require this for all staff and program leadership responsibilities? Requirement is not something easy at Cornell because, we are not a top-down organization like some of the land grants. All of our associations operate pretty much like a 501c3 with their own board of directors and executive directors. So it's a little bit tougher to require any kind of training. I would be very interested, whether it's now or at another time, in knowing if there's any ideas that I shared that might be applicable in your state, or if you have ideas that might help us to, to overcome any of the challenges that we had. I love the opportunities that we have through NAEPSDP to share in a peer-to-peer way. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing.
Yes, I do definitely want to thank all of you. I want to thank you, Amber and Nancy and Trish and Celeste, for sharing with all this information with us today. I think you've inspired us, and I think you've given us definitely a lot to think about. And of course, I'd like to thank everyone who is joining us today online as well for our 2019 virtual summer school session.